Under the bright lights of Washington, cameras flash as US President Donald Trump steps up to the podium, his voice filling the East Room with a mix of bravado and impatience.
We're going to work together very closely with Finland and with NATO. We have a very good relationship. As you know, I requested that they pay 5%, not 2%. And most people thought that was not going to happen, and it happened virtually unanimously. We had one laggard. It was Spain. Spain. You have to call them and find why are they a laggard. And they're doing well, too. You know, the funny thing, because of a lot of the things we've done, they're doing fine. They have no excuse not to do this, but that's all right. Maybe you should throw them out of...
He begins with a tone that has become familiar in his second term, blunt, unapologetic, and tinged with confrontation. We're going to work very closely with Finland and NATO, he says, leaning into the microphone. We have a very good relationship, as you know. I asked for them to pay 5%, not 2%, and most people thought that wouldn't happen, but it was passed virtually unanimously. There was only one laggard. That was Spain. The room stirs, a mix of whispers and camera shutters. Trump pauses, then repeats the name, almost for emphasis, Spain. You have to call them and find out why they're lagging. He chuckles, his expression turning from amusement to irritation. And they're fine too. The funny thing is, they're fine because of a lot of the things we've done. They have no excuse not to do it, but fine. Maybe they should kick them out of NATO, frankly. Those words, kick them out of NATO, land like a thunderclap across diplomatic circles. Within minutes, news agencies from Washington to Madrid begin flashing alerts. For the first time in NATO's history, a sitting US president has publicly suggested expelling a member state. Trump's statement is not an offhand remark. It's the latest escalation in his long-running campaign to push allies toward higher defense spending. In 2018, during his first term, he famously berated European leaders in Brussels, accusing them of taking advantage of American security guarantees. Now, 7 years later, the demand has risen from 2% of GDP to a staggering 5%. Behind the scenes, the Pentagon's advisors and State Department diplomats scramble to contain the fallout. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg issues a careful statement urging unity and dialogue among allies. But even he cannot hide the tension. Spain's defense spending stands at just over 1.4% of GDP, well below the original NATO target. And although Madrid has promised gradual increases, Trump's ultimatum shatters any sense of diplomatic subtlety. In Madrid, Spanish Prime Minister María González appears before Parliament, her tone measured but firm. Spain remains committed to the transatlantic alliance, she says, but we reject threats and unilateral ultimatums. The chamber erupts in applause. Analysts note the significance. No European leader in decades has had to respond to a direct threat of NATO expulsion. Trump, however, seems unfazed. In a follow-up press briefing, he doubles down. We're protecting countries that don't even like us half the time, he declares. The American taxpayer deserves better. We've built the strongest military on earth, and yet some of these nations, wealthy nations, don't want to pay their fair share. That's not going to continue under my watch. It's classic Trump, part negotiation tactic, part performance, and entirely deliberate. His aides, speaking anonymously, confirm that the president sees pressure as leverage. He's making a point, one senior official explains. 5% is the shock value, but it's also a test of loyalty. In Europe, the reaction is swift and polarized. Poland and the Baltic states express quiet sympathy, emphasizing the need for stronger defense. Germany, meanwhile, warns that such rhetoric undermines the credibility of the alliance. French President Emmanuel Macron calls Trump's remarks a dangerous provocation, while Italy's foreign minister labels them deeply counterproductive. For Spain, the stakes are personal. The country's strategic location, controlling access to the Mediterranean and hosting key NATO bases, makes it an indispensable ally. The US maintains forces at Rota and Morón de la Frontera, critical hubs for counter-terrorism and surveillance operations in North Africa. Expelling Spain, defense experts note, would not only fracture NATO, but also weaken Western operations across the Mediterranean and Sahel regions. Still, the symbolism matters. Trump's warning touches on a broader theme of his foreign policy, conditional alliance. Under the America First security doctrine, as his advisors call it, the US ties military support to measurable contributions. Nations unwilling to meet those targets face diplomatic isolation or, as in this case, open humiliation. Journalists press Trump for clarification. Mr. President, one asks, are you seriously considering expelling Spain from NATO? Trump shrugs. I said what I said. Maybe they should be kicked out, maybe not. We'll see. The ambiguity fuels headlines worldwide. In Madrid, public sentiment hardens. Protesters gather outside the US embassy carrying signs that read, Spain is not for sale and sovereignty is not negotiable. Spanish defense officials insist they have already increased spending by 35% since 2023, investing in naval modernization and joint EU defense projects. But for Trump, those efforts seem insufficient. By evening, the White House releases a brief statement attempting to soften the tone. The president's remarks highlight the importance of fair burden sharing within NATO. The United States continues to value Spain's partnership and commitment. Yet the damage is done. Spanish newspapers run front-page editorials titled Humiliated Ally and Trump's NATO Bombshell. Inside NATO headquarters in Brussels, ambassadors convene an emergency consultation. No formal expulsion mechanism exists in NATO's charter, but the alliance operates on consensus, meaning that political will, not legal framework, drives decisions. Diplomats describe the mood as tense but cautious. The US delegation insists the president's remarks were aimed at encouraging compliance, not confrontation. European diplomats, however, read them as a warning shot, especially as US officials quietly circulate draft language for a new 5% defense readiness framework. Under this proposal, members falling below that benchmark could lose voting privileges or operational access to joint missions. For Spain, the implications extend beyond defence. The country faces a fragile economy, rising energy costs, and domestic divisions over regional independence. A diplomatic standoff with Washington risks unsettling investor confidence and straining ties with the European Union, which has already expressed concern about Trump's unilateral diplomacy. Yet, in the broader context, this confrontation reflects a shift in global power politics. As the US presses its allies harder, Russia and China quietly watch, ready to exploit any cracks in Western unity. Moscow's foreign ministry issues a statement mocking NATO's internal disarray, while Beijing's state-run media describes Trump's demand as proof that Western alliances are built on coercion, not cooperation. At the Pentagon, military analysts warn against taking the rhetoric too literally. Trump knows the value of shock, one retired general says. He uses it to reset expectations. Spain won't be kicked out, but they will feel the heat, and that's the point. Still, the ripple effects reach beyond Europe. In Ottawa, Canadian officials privately expressed concern that Trump's 5% rule could set a precedent for broader renegotiations. In Tokyo and Seoul, defense ministries review their bilateral agreements with the US, wary of similar financial ultimatums. Meanwhile, NATO's internal dynamics begin to shift. Finland and Sweden, the alliance's newest members, quietly back Washington's call for greater spending, arguing that security has a price. Germany and France push back, calling for a collective European defense initiative less dependent on the US. In a televised interview, Trump frames his comments as patriotic realism. We love NATO, but NATO has to love us back. If countries want protection, they have to invest in it. America will not be the world's unpaid policeman anymore. His words resonate with his political base at home, where campaign rallies echo with chants of pay your share and no freeloaders. Economically, Trump's stance plays well with voters frustrated by rising domestic costs and endless foreign commitments. Strategically, however, the uncertainty sends shivers through the alliance's leadership. By week's end, diplomatic traffic between Washington and Madrid intensifies. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio calls his Spanish counterpart to reaffirm America's commitment to constructive dialogue. Yet privately, Rubio admits the administration's position is clear. 5% is non-negotiable. In an editorial for El País, one Spanish commentator sums it up succinctly: this is not just about numbers, it is about dignity. European analysts agree that Trump's approach represents a new phase of transactional diplomacy, one where alliances are measured by ledger books, not shared ideals. As the controversy unfolds, Trump remains characteristically unmoved. At a rally in Florida, he repeats the line that started it all, smiling as the crowd roars approval. Spain's a great country, he says, beautiful place, great people, but they've got to pay up. Maybe they'll stay in NATO, maybe they won't, who knows, we'll see what happens. For now, NATO stands intact, but the tremor from Washington's statement has exposed the alliance's fault lines between principle and pragmatism, tradition and transaction. Whether this episode becomes a passing flare-up or the beginning of a deeper fracture may depend on what happens next in Madrid, Brussels and the White House itself. What's certain, though, is that Trump's message and the shock it delivered has once again reminded the world of one enduring truth. In the new era of global diplomacy, no alliance is sacred and no partner beyond reproach.